What's going on, all my friends to the end? Well, to cap off all of my coverage of Chucky Season 1, I figured it would be a cool idea to take all 8 episodes of the first season and rank them for my own personal preference from worst to best. Now, I gave a full review of every single episode. We did a spoiler talk for about an hour with multiple guests after every single episode, and just a couple of days ago I did a full season-long review going over my thoughts of the entire season, how it all came together. So if you have not seen any of my coverage or know any of my thoughts on this show thus far and you'd like to learn any of that before watching this ranking, pause this video, check out all of that backlog content over the past couple of months. But for those of you that have been joining me for the past couple of months going over this show I enjoyed quite a bit. I'm still very excited for Season 2. Had some rockiness here and there. So this is an episode ranking that I think is going to be pretty interesting, and I think everybody that watches this show will have a very different ranking of what they watch this show for, what they enjoy about it, and what about it maybe didn't quite work for them. So going for this some context, I have only real one episode of these 8 that I do not like whatsoever, one episode that I absolutely loved and thought was just perfect television, and then 6 episodes that I thought were really good but had some spots here and there throughout them that maybe gave me some questions or did a story direction that I didn't like, or something along the way that I will get into. I'll try to get in somewhat in depth with all 8 of these. So with that being said, number 8 for me, the worst episode of the season, unfortunately, is going to be episode 8, the finale, An Affair to Dismember. I was hovering about 4 out of 5 as far as my season rating, as far as how much I liked this show at the end of episode 7. After episode 8, I dropped it all the way back to a 3.5 after kind of thinking about it on a couple of days, watching the finale again. To me, this finale really does drop the ball quite a bit in a number of ways. I think that there's some interesting things that they did as far as bringing in, 72 Chuckies and trying to stage this massacre at a theater, having Andy and Kyle eventually meet up, and all of this stuff's going to come to a head. All the build-up to the finale was really good. And I think Chucky himself in this episode, both the animatronic, a lot of great facial expressions in that theater massacre, as well as the voice acting by Brad Dourif that's been on point all season long, that was the standout of the episode. Unfortunately, just about everything else either left me cold or they just chopped off and didn't resolve at all and left it all lingering for next season, which I don't like when shows do that, especially with the first season. I didn't feel like they did enough with the kid characters, and they left none of them in a spot where I'm really interested to see any more. I mean, Jake, they kind of made his entire arc by the end of this episode just whether or not he's able to call Devin his boyfriend. I mean, that was like the big victory over Chucky. He's like, don't call my boyfriend that. And that just felt strange, being the way that they've kind of structured this relationship throughout the entire series. It felt weird that that was even something that he wouldn't just say easily. Devin is like a bystander for the entire episode, so he doesn't really get anything here. You don't have anything with Lexi that convinces me that she's made this big change that they try to get you to go along with. She's just here for one scene where Junior tries to lure her, and she's like, oh, I used to be that way, and you were always the brightness in my life. And it's like, you didn't like him at all. All 3-4 episodes that you were technically dating him, you couldn't have given a fuck if he had imploded right there in front of you. Nonetheless, I can rant on Lexi even more. Junior, the one character of these 4 that really had an interesting arc going, just gets killed off. And then all of the legacy characters, I didn't like what they did with any of them. I mean, Tiffany flat out goes against Charles Lee Ray, says that she's done with Chucky, decapitates one of them. Then the very next scene that you see her in, she's carrying on with Charles Lee Ray's plan with all these dolls. Didn't make any sense to me. You have Nika, who is left with no limbs. She's the best character of the show. She's the best actress of the show. And now I have no idea what the hell they're going to do with her. Maybe she'll end up in a doll at some point. That's about the only path she has to any kind of mobility anymore. But despite being very demented, and I liked the balls to go there, that was the one character that I did not want to see left that way. And then Andy and Kyle might be dead, Kyle might not be dead, I don't fucking know. And the show doesn't really do a good job at placing either one of those scenarios in an interesting way or making it make any sense whatsoever. And then I've been waiting all season long to see something going on with Andy and Chucky, some big confrontation, some big culmination, because we really didn't get it in Cult. They teased it, and then he ended up just getting double-crossed and outsmarted immediately. And here you kind of get the same thing. He just shows up, takes the truck, flips off Tiffany, and then Tiffany has him dead to rights right there 2 seconds later. So A lot of the decisions that they made in this episode just really didn't feel like a satisfying end to the season, and all of the big lingering questions they chose not to address until next season. So as a season finale, very disappointing. Unfortunately, dropped my overall reception of the season as a whole, and I hope they do a lot better job next year, because it's my least favorite episode of the 8. The episode titled Twice the Grieving, Double the Loss. This was all of the setup, all of the putting the domino pieces up, all of the putting the chessboard pieces where they need to be for the finale to knock them all down in a blaze of glory. And unfortunately, because the finale did not do that, it kind of retroactively makes this episode a little bit less interesting to me as a whole. The big thing going on here is that this is the episode that they finally turn Junior into a killer. You have this whole setup from the beginning to where Tiffany shows up, plays like she's having somewhat of an affair with Devon Sawa's character, and Junior sees that, and throughout the episode, by the end of it, Chucky is in his ear and eventually convinces him to beat his father to death. And that's the big thing in the episode that was like, holy shit, cool, that's some crazy stuff going on. Oh, there's all these dolls that got activated too? Interesting, where are things gonna go from here? And because they didn't get the follow-through for me, all the setup really doesn't feel as interesting, because Junior doesn't really go anywhere interesting, and all the dolls don't go anywhere because we don't know where the fuck they're going till next year. Beyond all of that, you have a little bit of a mini breakup between Jake and Devon. I was on the fence about the performances and the deliverance of that relationship for most of the season, so I didn't really get any kind of emotion from this whole scene where Devon's leaving because of his mother's death and he's got nowhere to stay. Jake's upset about that. You have a whole thing where he says, hey, I stayed in Hackensack because of you. And then you have the whole thing with Lexi calling Jake family whenever he decided to leave Hackensack. Just the development between the kids in this episode kind of fell flat for me. So as a setup, initially, I liked all the big major story directions. I didn't care for all the little smaller moments. But like I've said twice now, because the finale kind of dropped the ball, even the setup stuff doesn't really hit as hard anymore. So it's at number 7. Number 6 is going to be episode 5, Little Lies. Now this was the second half of the season, kind of getting into full force. This is where you started to see all of the legacy characters come back, starting with Nika and Tiffany. And their whole exchange is the best part of the episode, where you've got them doing that hot little bound recreation, and then you've got Fiona Dourif playing Chucky inside of Nika's body and then snapping back into Nika, as well as the flashback sequence where you get Fiona Dourif literally playing her father and playing Charles Lee Ray back in the 80s and giving us the introduction of how Chucky met Tiffany, which one of the flashback sequences that I thought was pulled off pretty well, mostly just because I didn't realize that was Fiona Dourif playing him until after I saw the behind the scenes, and that just blew my mind. So the ADR, the voice work, the overdubbing of Brad Dourif and Jennifer Tilly's actual voice, I wish they wouldn't have done that, but aside from that, pretty good flashback sequence. And this is the episode where you really, for the moment, I've kind of started to feel like the kids were coming together, namely Lexi, as somewhat of a group. This is the episode where they feel like they have killed Chucky, they have wiped him out, and eventually he shows that he is not. They get to this whole town meeting at the school, and the principal's head literally just rolls onto stage, and Chucky shows that he had transferred his soul into a Tommy doll. I don't know anybody that watched the show that was actually surprised by that. Certainly Child's Play fans know better, but the whole thing about the kids feeling victorious for a moment, overall, it was a good episode. It was really just small moments here and there that kept it from being great. But this is the section of episodes now where I think they're all pretty damn good, with the exception of maybe a couple stylistic choices like the ADR. Number 5 is going to be the premiere episode, episode 1, Death by Misadventure. A really good setup episode. And, you know, most season openers, especially a series opener, don't tend to be the standout episodes, very rarely. And that's because they have to build everything. They have to introduce you to the characters, they got to introduce you to the world or to where this is going on, they got to tie in all of the previous lore with something like this where you've got decades of films and how does that play into here. They got to set up everything and give you a taste of what you're going to expect for the rest of the season. So season openers have a lot on their shoulders. And for the most part, I really enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed the character of Jake, and I enjoyed the fact that him and Chucky right away start to have an interesting little bit of a relationship where Chucky murders his father because his father is an absolute prick. I even enjoyed some of the darkness of the interaction between Jake and the evil Devon Sawa, to where it gave a lot of context for the struggles of Jake and where we're going to see his character arc go for the rest of the season. There's a pretty decent kill as far as the concept of it, with him electrocuting Devon Sawa and his son seeing him while he's sitting there. I just didn't like the slapstick humor of him vomiting quite as much as he was vomiting, or spitting out the fucking alcohol. Semantics. People try to correct me on that. He's not vomiting. Whatever. He's spitting shit out of his mouth, and it was a fucking lot of it, okay? So that was the one thing in this episode that kind of bugged me, and I felt like they hammered a little bit hard on the bullying side of things. And that ultimately didn't really go anywhere aside from the character of Lexi throughout this season. So they were building up a lot of characters to almost like Jake is just hated by everybody. And by episode 2, Lexi's the only person left that treats him that way. So I felt it was unnecessary, and it was a little bit much, at least from my own high school experience, for how hard they went on it. But as a setup episode, it's a good episode. It's a good start to the 8 that we have here that we're talking about. Number 4 is going to be episode 6, Cape Queer. Now this was very close to being my favorite episode of the season. The first half or so of this episode had some of my favorite sequences of the entire series. You have the opening with Andy and Kyle doing this little Pulp Fiction thing where they're both undercover as census takers, and they're in this house trying to see if a Chucky doll is there, and when he comes out and they just gun him down right in front of the family. That was my favorite scene of the entire 8 episodes. And then later on you get a great interaction again with Nika and Tiffany, to where Nika has now swapped back and taken control of her body, and she has this whole thing where she's playing poker with Tiffany and trying to play as if she is Charles Lee Ray inside of her own body. It's very meta and very mind-numbing trying to figure it out, but her performance, the subtle changes that she gives, it was a really great scene. And it was the best Tiffany scene by far, because I'm somebody that likes the darker, smarter, more maniacal Tiffany and not the really turned up, campy, comedic Tiffany. And this was the most sinister that she was ever in this 8 episodes, was when she's sitting here and having this exchange with Nika and knows what's going on but doesn't quite let her, and actually like stabs her. And she's like, I stabbed you like 5 minutes ago and you didn't even feel it. Like, bitch, who do you think you're playing with? Like, that whole thing was awesome. Those 2 sequences, if that was all this episode was, easy number 1 for me. But then you have the whole thing where the kids are coming together. They're playing off of Cape Fear and trying to have this little siege trap in the house where they got this doll tied up. Ultimately, it went nowhere and didn't work at all because Chucky's small, and for some reason they didn't fucking think about that. It comes down the chimney, and you get 2 major character deaths in here that felt like they just totally wasted character potential. You get, I always called her Rowan, her character's name was Bree, that we had this whole secret the whole season. They finally reveal it's cancer, which was a little lame, and then they just kill her. So that amounted to nothing. And then you have Devon's mom that was just starting to get interesting, her arc, and they kill her. So that amounted to nothing. So you have 2 of the best sequences and 2 completely wasted characters in the same episode. Lands you right here in the middle. Number 3 is going to be episode 4, Just Let Go. Now, a lot of what saves this episode for me and makes it one of the better experiences of the season is the hospital setting. I've said numerous times, hospitals really freak me out, and they really do add a level of atmosphere to a horror setting. You think Exorcist 3, you think Nightmare on Elm Street 3, you think Cult of Chucky to a certain extent. Nonetheless, I like hospitals. Halloween 2, that's a better one. I like hospital settings in horror, and this whole episode takes place in the hospital. So the lighting, the white clean walls, the neon kind of shades that you get throughout this episode, I thought was a really cool visual aesthetic. And then you have basically Lexi and Jake teaming up for the first time, begrudgingly. It was the one episode that made their relationship transition feel natural, to where they're kind of just working with each other out of spite. And even though Jake saves her, and maybe that does smooth things over a little bit, you never really get the feeling that they're friends so much, and they pushed it way too far in that direction too quickly after this episode. And then you get Toxic Avenger Chucky, that's what I call him. So the melted ass Chucky from the end of the Inferno, and he's chasing them throughout the hospital, he's at the actual house and everything, and it's a really cool visual for a different version of a Chucky doll. I always like seeing how they make Chucky damage different every single time, and we've seen his face chopped off and all other shit. So that whole melted Chucky was really cool. There's an interesting comedic kill here with syringes. It's a fucking weird ass sequence where this guy is putting his hands and eating all over all these food. It's very odd. But the fact that Chucky hates him as much as the audience does just for the 2 minutes they know this guy is hilarious. One of the best Chucky lines. And overall, it's a nice episode. It's a really good, entertaining episode. The only thing that holds it back is just that Lexi and Jake thing, to where it just felt like they needed more than 8 episodes to go from here and pendulum shift over to here. That still is one of my biggest annoyances with these 8 episodes, is the way they utilize that character of Lexi. And this episode also gives you one of the better flashback sequences, to where you have teenage Chucky and he's like playing Peter Pan to all of these different orphans as they're like his lost boys. He eventually kills the janitor, and it shows how he meets Eddie Caputo, which for a flashback sequence, for the little nugget of information they give here, it follows that line where it doesn't take away from the mystery, and it gives you a little cool Easter egg for the fans. So one of the better flashback sequences for me too. Number 2 is going to be episode 3, I Like to Be Hugged. And this is the episode where Jake is fully on board with killing Lexi, and he's trying to go through these different plots on how he can kill Lexi. He tries to kill her in the park. Junior was there instead of her, and he might have just killed her right there if that was actually who he thought it was. She comes to his house later on to try to do this fake-ass bitchy apology, and he about kills her right there too. I liked seeing potential murder Jake. I thought that was some of the most interesting character development that we got from that character, was how episode 2 and episode 3 kind of merged together for that small little window of Chucky being able to influence him. I like the whole inferno that takes place in the 3rd act of this episode, to where Chucky is now in Lexi's house trying to do the deed for Jake. Starts this whole fire. There's this great visual where he's sitting there laughing maniacally while Lexi's in the corner of the room. You got everybody doing this little silent disco thing while everything behind him is burning. There's a lot of really cool visuals and a lot of cool horror throwbacks, like with the changeling with the railing going across with flames, that makes this a standout episode. And you also get probably the most useful and the most important of the flashback sequences here, which is the one where Chucky as a young boy kills his mother, where you got a guy that breaks in, butchers the shit out of his dad, and while they're hiding in the closet, the killer opens up and he's already stabbed his mom to death, and he's like, I helped. Like, if you're gonna do flashbacks of Charles Lee Ray, that was the one, if any of them, that felt like it was earned, that felt like there was a purpose to going back and answering a question. That was it. That was the only one. The rest of them, there's a couple of them that are cool that I've already talked about. Most of the other ones I could pretty much go without. They felt like they went nowhere. This was the flashback sequence that's actually worth talking about. But my number 1 is episode 2, which is Give Me Something Good to Eat, the Halloween episode. And to me, this was just perfect television. I liked the episode that started off this season, had a couple of small issues, got to this episode and just loved it start to finish. Thought that it was an amazing second episode. It got me so excited for the potential of the rest of the show. And I was just on cloud 9 as a Chucky fan for everything. I love the fact that it was a Halloween episode. Some of our favorite TV shows have a great Halloween episode, and a lot of us horror fans, that's one of our favorites, is whatever episode is on Halloween, and they play into all of those visuals and play into that time of the year. Seeing Chucky walk around with that little Hello Kitty mask was awesome. And what really makes this episode stand out is that you get the best and the most interesting development between the relationship of Chucky and Jake. You get to where they actually feel like friends. You get genuine human-to-human interaction between somebody and Chucky, which we don't really get in this series at all in the movies and hardly ever in the show, to where he's sitting there talking to him about, you know, being gay and the fact that he has a gender fluid son, and you get a moment where Chucky actually connects with somebody. Is it for nefarious reasons? Yes. Is Chucky genuinely interested in this conversation? Probably not. But as viewers, that whole development of their relationship as Chucky really appeals to Jake's trauma and really does make him feel like he is his friend, and slowly gets his claws into him, to where by the end of the episode he convinces him that we need to kill Lexi. That was the best part of this show to me as far as character development, and especially for the character of Jake, was those two bonding. And then beyond that, a very standout sequence in here that kind of set up the character of Lexi for failure for the rest of the season for me personally is the whole costume party where she comes downstairs and dresses like Jake's dad as he's being electrocuted. To me, brilliant and subtle creative way to make her the most despicable character in the show. And they should have stopped there. You know, they should have not have made her so despicable past that, to where you get episode 3 and she's just a snobby bitch and has no idea what the hell she did wrong. Episode 4, she's still being a snobby bitch. And then 5, 6, 7, 8, she's cool. If they had left the costume and then after that made her see the error of her ways, that entire negative of this series goes away for me. But as of right now, as it felt like they were setting up her to be our genuine big bad as far as the high school story goes. They did a great job with that. So episode 2 to me, perfect hour or so of television, perfect episode, and this is the level of quality, the level of tight writing, and the level of character development that I hope we get a lot more of in season 2. So number 1 for me, episode 2, give me something good to eat. So that's it, guys. That is my ranking of all 8 episodes of Chucky. Let me know your ranking down below, as well as some brief reasons why. Do you agree? Do you highly disagree? Are you excited for a season 2? And let me know what your thoughts are on season 1 as a whole, if you'd like to do that as well. Instead of doing a ranking, just give me your thoughts down below and we'll talk about Chucky season 1. Like I said at the beginning of the video, tons of backlog content. Go check all that out. I've reviewed all the movies. I've ranked the movies. I've ranked the kills. I've ranked the dolls. I have talked Chucky like crazy over the past 6 years. So please check out all of that. Like and share this video. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything in the future. And as always, guys, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.